All right, so first question today, and we're going to do this in the order that they were received. So we're going to start off with Linda. So Linda said, what would you suggest for a 74-year-old overweight woman with lupus, fibromyalgia, bad arthritis in both knees and one ankle, Hashimoto's thyroiditis, so not able to do much exercise? I got a new dog that is very active and I'm trying to keep up with him on walks. LOL. I have lost almost 3 pounds in 2 weeks. That's wonderful. So Linda, the thing that I always recommend, first thing to do is to go off gluten. So if you are not off gluten yet, that is definitely the thing to do because generally people, I mean, thyroid issue definitely plays a role, but but going off of gluten will help you decrease your weight significantly. Usually people will lose about 10% of their body weight in the first couple months, and then they'll lose about 3 pounds a month until they get down to their high school weight, as long as you are healthy in high school and as long as you don't have a thyroid issue or some of these other hormonal issues. It's also more challenging the older you get. So take that with a grain of salt. But going off of gluten, going off of dairy, going off of sugar, those are really the big ones. Staying as close to paleo and keto as possible with basically meat and veggies is ideal. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that you want to make sure that your thyroid is optimized. In order to do this, you want to make sure your adrenals are supported, your mitochondria is supported, which is the energy center of every cell in the body, because both of those are actually going to make the thyroid work better. And then you want to make sure that you ramp up on your thyroid in what we call our subjective ramp up, where you get to a point where it's just a little bit too much thyroid and you start to experience some hyperthyroid symptoms, like you've got palpitations, tremors, you're angry at everybody, maybe some diarrhea, hard time sleeping. But that tells you that you've gone too much and then you just back off to your previous dose. And that's the ideal dose that you live at while you're fixing the causes of having the Hashimoto's and the other symptoms that you have. Because it sounds like you probably have a number of these toxicities that will cause the symptoms that you have, like heavy metals, chemicals, molds, and the big one are infections. So there's certain infections that will cause muscle pain, like fibromyalgia and lupus. They'll cause arthritis in ankles, especially, and the small joints of the hands and the thumbs, and that's Bartonella. So those are definitely things to look at. But first, you're going to want to make sure that you optimize your food and that you optimize your hormones, and then you're going to be able to chase after your dog all you want. So thanks so much for your question, Linda. All right, next up is Karen with a Y and a K. So you said, is the use of cholestyramine the best way to get ochratoxin A out of the body? I don't believe so. I think that it's a pretty darn good way, but I haven't found that people tolerate it well. And consequently, I never used it on a regular basis. It had to get compounded. It tasted awful. And so I found other ways to do it. So there's a lot of different binders that you can use. Some of them will bind more preferentially to the ochratoxin, but you have to remember that it's rare when you just have one mycotoxin. So usually they're in combination. It may look like just one ochratoxin on your mycotoxin test, but what happens after you start binding and pulling and you retest 6 months later or so, what you end up finding is that, oh my gosh, there's all these other mycotoxins or one other or two other mycotoxins that are present. So oftentimes you may want to rotate some of these binders. So we're looking at things like some of the clays, activated charcoal, zeolite. Those are kind of some of my favorites. And then there's humic and fulvic acid. So those are generally the ones that we'll use. And it depends also whether or not you're able to take binders away from food. You know, most of them have to be about 60 minutes away from food and supplements. And it's really hard to do that. If you have a challenge doing that, like I do, then you're going to want to go with a product that is like humic and fulvic acid that you can actually take with other supplements and with food. That's a product like Biotoxin Binder. And you can get all this stuff from our store at store.fixyourfatigue.org. Nick's with me today, who's one of my assistants. Nick, if you can just drop that into the chat, into Facebook, that would be helpful. So that's the store.fixyourfatigue.org. And in order to register for our store, you just type in Hirsch. And then if you want to get $5 off your first order, you type in Hirsch again as the coupon code at checkout. So anything that I mentioned today that you're interested in purchasing, you guys can jump on in there as a benefit of being part of our Facebook group. So thank you for that. So those are my recommendations on binders. And let's see if there was anything else on that. It looks like you've got a number of toxicities that you're dealing with. So it looks like some of the infections, heavy metals, molds. And you also want to make sure that you're always taking a binder when you're going after these infections. The way that I envision these toxicities is kind of like a toxic matrix or a toxic ball, where you've got your heavy metals and your chemicals and your molds and your infections, and they're all kind of in there interlaced because they all feed off of each other. And when you start to pull one of them out, guess what? It breaks up this ball and they release a bunch of toxins. And so then consequently, you need to have binders present, as well as a little bit of each of these antimicrobials to go after the infections that are present, because once you release them, you want to make sure that you know what to do with them, or you have a plan. All right, Karen, hopefully that was helpful for you. Thanks for your question. Next up is Jessica. So Jessica asks, what are the best steps I can take now as I am exploring different doctors and possibly causes to prevent descending into losing my job ability to work? I've tried elimination diets, foods, etc., without a noticeable difference. So Jessica, I'm glad that you're realizing how important it is to address these causes. So there are 33 potential causes of fatigue and autoimmunity and long haulers. They're all kind of part of the same. But there's 33 causes, and everybody who has fatigue has 20 plus causes. So diet is just one cause, unfortunately, right? So when we're looking at these causes, we're looking at deficiencies. Here, you know what? I'm going to share my screen because that is going to explain a bit of this. So if you take a look, here, okay. So if we take a look at, this is our workbook from our program. And one of the things that's really important is looking at all of these different causes. So we can separate these causes into deficiencies and toxicities. And so we're talking about deficiencies in hormones and nutrients, as well as lifestyle habits, neurotransmitters, and then toxicities and the heavy metals, the chemicals, the molds, the infections, the allergies, the negative emotional patterns, and the electromagnetic fields. So this is where the money's at, is that you want to make sure that you are focused on these things. Now, in order to make sure that you don't lose your ability to work, it's really important that you go through the process in a particular fashion. So we recommend our 4-step process. Is the first step you assess, and this is the videos that go along with our workbook. First step is to assess the causes that you have. Now, fortunately, 75% of those 33 causes can be determined by symptoms alone. Okay, so this means that when if you go through our program where you have a list like this and you're determining all of your different causes, that you're going to know after you've been through step 1, 75% of your causes. So then you can immediately start taking the supplements. You don't even need labs, okay, which is really awesome. So it saves you money on labs too. And then you want to replace the deficiencies, okay, which are over here, because we want you to be as strong as possible going through this process. And this is how you can mitigate the chance of losing your job, because when you go after these toxicities, these heavy metals, chemicals, molds, and infections, it's really stressful on the body. And it sounds like from experience, you know that it's very easy to kind of get pushed into more fatigue. So adrenals optimized, mitochondria optimized, thyroid optimized, any of the sex hormones, vitamins, nutrients, lifestyle habits. And the reason why we also have lifestyle habits further on down the list is because it's so much easier to change your lifestyle habits when you're feeling better. So when you replace these deficiencies, especially the big 3, the adrenals, the mitochondria, and the thyroid, it'll generally give you an uptick in your energy about 1 or 2 points. So if you're at 4 out of 10 in terms of your energy, where 10 out of 10 is ideal, it'll take you up to 5 or it'll take you up to 6. So it makes you nice and strong. And then you can go into step 3, where you open up the detoxification pathways. And then step 4 is removing these toxicities. Okay. And I'm speaking kind of quick because I want to make sure I get through everybody's questions. I don't usually speak this fast, but hopefully that is helpful for you. Looks like we've got some, I'm just checking in the Facebook group. Okay, we're good. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen there. Hopefully that was helpful for you, Jessica. And then I'm just looking at some of the other things you filled out. Yeah, so it looks like you just haven't found all of your causes. So you're still on step 1. So that's really important. That provides you, if you went into Google Maps, or if you just went into your car and you were just going to drive around and hope that you got somewhere, and the place was an hour away that you'd never been to, guess what? You're not going to get there. So essentially you need a map. You need to know what causes you have, and then you need to match up the treatments for each of those causes in a particular order. So that's my recommendation. Hope that was helpful. All right, next up we got Lord Carl. Well, looks like Lord Carl is perhaps here, but didn't have any questions, so welcome. Angela, you're up next. So is there any science to tell us about Omicron, and if long haul COVID is associated with it, or is it too soon to know? It's a great question. I've definitely seen several people who have had long COVID from Omicron. I have not seen any data on this at this time, though. Thank you, Angela. Doris. Doris says, I'm diagnosed with chronic fatigue syndrome. I'm not bedridden or housebound, but unable to work, study, have a normal life due to various symptoms, fatigue, brain fog, cognitive problems, gut issues. Sorry to hear that. What I experienced that when I'm on holidays, for example, almost all the times my symptoms were completely gone. How is this explainable? I guess there's a connection with the autonomic nervous system. I feel as if I'm in fight or flight mode almost all the time. I also feel much better in the evenings most of the time, even though I have no adrenal fatigue issues due to my cortisol values, which are not always accurate. But you say you feel better in the evening. So if you do feel better in the evenings, then you do have adrenal gland dysfunction. So one of the things that we have seen in thousands of patients is that everybody has adrenal gland dysfunction and mitochondrial dysfunction. Okay. So that's that has to do with being feeling better in the evenings. But then in terms of how to explain the holidays, so sometimes it has to do with stress. Sometimes it has to do with mold. So when people are leaving their environment, and you leave your environment for more than 5 days, usually around day 4 or day 5, people will notice that their energy is significantly better. Now, if your energy was significantly better the day after you left, maybe your detoxification pathways are actually quite good and you're living in mold. But that would be my concern. Either you have mold in your home, mold in your work, mold in your car. Okay, so definitely look at that. We do have a step 1 course, which talks about the labs that we recommend, as well as how to assess your home and your body for mold. And so you can definitely do that. And we do have a mold remediation coach on staff that you get one-on-ones with. She's also our nutrition coach and our health coach that you get one-on-ones with when you join one of our one-on-one programs. So in case that is helpful for you. Yep, and so looks like you found thyroid deficiency and neurotransmitter deficiency, but remember, there are 20 plus causes. You're gonna have 20 plus causes of chronic fatigue syndrome, okay? So you found 2 of them, you need to find the other 18, okay? So don't stop until you find those causes. All right, up next is, and thank you, Doris, for your question. Many blessings to you. Sam, so Sam says, when I exercise, lots of times I get flu-like symptoms afterwards, feeling of extreme fatigue and not feeling well or feeling sick. No MD has been able to figure this out. Do you have any clues as to why this would happen? So the flu-like symptom afterwards is oftentimes because you're activating an infection. So when you exercise, exercise is wonderful for the body, but it's also stressful. Okay, so um, exercise uses a process called hormesis, which is basically that the body gets stressed and then it builds itself back up stronger. But when you have chronic stress on the body already from these 20 plus different causes, and your adrenal gland is your adrenals are dysfunctional as well as your mitochondria, then consequently they cannot survive the stress. They cannot tolerate the stress. So you stress the body with hormesis when you exercise, and then you just feel worse afterwards. And when you have a particular infection, it's also going to trigger the immune system, and consequently, you're going to get that flu-like illness. Okay, so I would imagine that your causes, and I believe that you've jumped into the step 1 course, so congratulations, Sam, way to go. When you go through that process, and you're going to be able to determine which causes you have, and then you'll be able to see that there are most likely that you have infections, and then you're going to know which ones to target, how to treat them when you jump into the rest of the program. All right, thank you, Sam. Next up is Dawn. Dawn says, can being born near coal burning facility cause mental illness? Daughter adopted from Bulgaria. Absolutely. So coal plants produce mercury, and it's one of the main sources of mercury that we have in the world. And so when the coal vapor ends up going out over the oceans and settles in there, if you, it also obviously goes around into the towns around the coal plants. And so you get exposed to that mercury vapor, and there's over 100,000 pounds of mercury that are dumped into our oceans, and consequently anything that we consume from the oceans is going to increase mercury. Silver fillings are half mercury as well, and then the exposure that unfortunately your daughter has is also going to then affect, it's going to hijack the immune system, and then infections are going to become more opportunistic, detoxifications are going to become more clogged. So I would highly recommend starting to work through this process, opening up detoxification pathways. One of the best things that you can do is to grab a sauna, and the sauna that we recommend is the Therasage sauna. So Nick, if you can go ahead and drop into the Facebook comments, the fixyourfatigue.com/recommended. You guys can go to that site and you can see all the products that I recommend, and you'll see the Therasage sauna, and you can click on that and you get a discount when you use our link. And we do get a little bit of a referral fee, but you actually get a discount when you use that link. So go ahead and do that, because saunas are amazing, and they are a huge part of getting rid of toxins out of the body. And oftentimes you can get kids to use it, even if you can't get them to take certain supplements. And there are so many different toxins. I mentioned the 100,000 pounds of mercury. There's, lead is found in upwards of 70% of all lipsticks and other cosmetics. There's 86,000 different chemicals that we're exposed to on a regular basis. So I believe that everybody really needs to be using sauna on a daily or every other day, couple time a week basis, taking binders, other things like glutathione, N-acetylcysteine, things to detoxify the body, because of all this exposure that we have. And fatigue is just another example of the total burden, the total body burden effect of all of these toxicities. Hopefully that was helpful for you, Dawn. Many blessings to you and your daughter. And remember, I forgot to remind you guys that we don't have a physician-patient relationship in this environment. I am just giving you advice as a health coach in the online environment. And this is not medical advice. This is just my experience. And I do recommend that you get advisement from a local physician if you have any questions. All right. So right now, let's just take a quick break, and I want to share with you guys the special information that I wanted to provide you. So we do have a course. I'm going to share my screen again with you, and and just give you a quick glimpse of it, because right now we're doing 50% off of this course. And so this course walks you through our 4-step process where we go, you've got the workbook, and then you're going through step 1, step 2, step 3, and step 4. Okay, where it's assessing those different causes, these 33 plus causes, and then replacing the deficiencies, opening up the detoxification pathways, and then removing all these toxicities. Now, we know that you're going to need support going through this process. So normally we don't include it, but now we are, where we are going to include a bonus 12 months access to our online community. It's like a Facebook group, but it's not on Facebook. It's on something called Mighty Networks. And I'm in there with our health coaches that we'll answer your questions in guaranteed 2 business days. And it's just wonderful to have that support so you can get your questions answered going through the program. You do have lifetime access to this course, as well as the workbook for any of the updates that are going to be provided. Okay. And then there are a few other bonuses that are included. There are the, here, let me actually, I can share my screen again. There are the live Q&As that I have with our group program and our one-on-ones that you will have access to, and you can search through these. We also have trainings in nervous system retraining for those of you who have trauma and autonomic dysfunction, which is really important. We do have some energy healing special sessions. We have some mindfulness training as some of the bonuses that we have in the program. So hopefully, if this is something that you're interested in, normally it's $4,000. Right now it is $2,000, and Nick is going to drop that information into the comments, so you guys can take a look at that if you want as well. We also have a payment plan which costs the same because we want to support you in this process, and so you can make payments once a month for 6 months if you want as well. So that's that. Didn't want to take too much time to do that, but did want to share with you guys that we are having that 50% off right now until the end of March. So let's go ahead and dive into our questions, and you can drop any questions that you have about the course and that special deal into the group, and Nick can answer it, or I will answer it if she can't. So Vaughn is the next person up. So Vaughn said, not fully vaccinated due to severe reaction to the Pfizer vaccine. Wonder, with new variant being discussed, if I need to risk my reaction in order to be protected. I have had COVID twice, the latest being Delta in 2021. So good news for you, Vaughn. There was just a study that came out of Israel where they took a look at vitamin D deficiency, and there was speculation on this, and there were some other studies that were looking at this, but this was the best study that I've seen so far. And they found that there was a 87% reduced risk of going into the hospital and dying of COVID when you have adequate vitamin D levels. So said another way is that when you have adequate vitamin D levels, there is a very, very low chance of you being hospitalized and dying. Okay, so I would definitely recommend, or what I've been recommending to the people in my community, is at least 10,000 international units a day of vitamin D3. The product that I like is by Designs for Health. It is in our store, and it's called Vitamin D Supreme. And there are some other things that we also recommend as part of our protocol. Nick, if you can drop in there the link. It is the here, I'll put it in there. It's the pandemic.fixyourfatigue.org, which basically has the information that I recommend for folks on what to take for prevention, and then what to take for treatment if you do feel worse. The most important thing is getting treatment early. That's kind of what we're seeing. especially with something like ivermectin and with some of these antivirals that we recommend. So before the virus can take hold, you want to make sure that you've got these products on hand so you can immediately start taking high doses of them and keeping things at bay. Now, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't necessarily be vaccinated. There are some benefits to the vaccine, but unfortunately, I have seen a lot of negative side effects to the vaccine. And if you've already had a reaction to it, I'm hesitant to recommending it again. I would look at other things as well, which is a more natural protocol. And we do have research on so many of these different supplements that we're recommending: zinc and quercetin and the vitamin D, like I mentioned, and some other ones, vitamin C. They've all been shown to be helpful against other coronaviruses, retroviruses. Oftentimes, there's some research on these particular viruses, the COVID viruses, even though they are evolving. Some of them are targeting the spike protein. So if you're going to have, we do know that ivermectin works on the spike protein in 4 different ways. And we do know that these supplements are also working on decreasing the viral replication and decreasing the adhesion of the spike protein in several different ways as well. So, they say 2 heads are better than 1, 4 heads are better than 2. I would much rather take all these, with something as unpredictable as COVID, I'd much rather take a number of these different supplements that are acting in different ways on this mechanism to decrease my chance of getting it, because it's not just about hospitalization and death, it's about getting long COVID. And I know we've got some other questions coming up on long COVID. We need to make sure that we are being proactive and make sure that we're taking the things that we need to do to prevent us from getting it. Because you can get a very mild case of COVID and you can end up with long COVID or long haulers. So those are my 2 cents. And yeah, and so Vaughn says that his face has been getting numb since the first shot of Pfizer. His heart was never an issue, and oftentimes he gets a rapid heartbeat now. Confusion and stupor many times during the day. Yeah. So go ahead and take the protocol, the pandemic protocol that I dropped into the chat. That's going to operate in different ways. If you can get hold of ivermectin, that is something that I've also been recommending. But like I'll mention to a question that we've got coming up in a little bit, I don't have a ton of experience. I haven't worked with too many people. I've worked with 2 people who've had vaccine reactions, who've resolved them going through my protocol. But I have spoken with my functional medicine practitioner friends who total, I would say, probably about 1,000 people that group has seen, and this is the protocol that they're using, the one that I put into the pandemic. So plus the ivermectin, if you can get access to that. All right. So Vasilios, your question is, does your chronic fatigue program apply to those diagnosed with MS? So it is not a guarantee of success, but our program works on the causes of autoimmunity. So I did a summit earlier this year called the Hidden Causes Summit, Fatigue and Autoimmunity. And the reason why I felt like I could step into that is because these causes of autoimmunity are the same causes of fatigue. They're just operating on different parts of the body. So everybody who has fatigue has autoimmunity, and they have autoimmunity from heavy metals, chemicals, molds, infections. I'm going to share my screen again because that's something that I like to do. Because I'm going to show you these toxicities, right? All of these toxicities can cause autoimmunity. MS is an autoimmune condition, multiple sclerosis, right? It's autoimmunity to the myelin sheaths, right? Now, oftentimes people who have autoimmunity, whether it's MS or whether it's rheumatoid arthritis or lupus or fibromyalgia or whatever, oftentimes they're going to have fatigue. And the reason why they're going to have fatigue is because these toxicities end up causing these deficiencies, which cause fatigue. So adrenal gland dysfunction, it's responsible for our get up and go in the morning. Mitochondrial energy, produce about 80 to 90% of our energy, and get squashed by these toxicities over here. Okay, so it definitely can help if you haven't gone this route before, but I am not an MS expert. I have never resolved MS. I've worked with maybe 2 people, maybe 3 in the entire history of my practice. So I make no guarantees, but I do know about autoimmunity, and I will support you the best that I can in the program. But if you can find a functional medicine practitioner who is addressing all of these causes, because not all, 90% of all functional medicine practitioners and natural medicine practitioners, unfortunately, are not addressing all of these causes. If you can find somebody who is, and I would say, I'm going to share my screen again, or you can rewind this video a little bit and you can take a look, you can take a screenshot of this, because you want to go into an office with a practitioner and you want to say, what is your comfort level in dealing with all of these causes? Have you reversed, have you eliminated heavy metals out of somebody's bodies, mold, chemicals, intestinal infections, all this sort of stuff, right? So you want to make sure, you want to read their face, you want to look at their body language, you want to figure out, have they reversed, have they removed these causes out of somebody's life? And if they say yes, and you believe them, and you're able to see some testimonials, then I would go with somebody who specializes, who that's all they do is MS. You know, that's why I do fatigue, is because there's so many nuances to it. It's very complex. And so you want somebody who's dedicating their life to doing this. All right. Hopefully that was helpful for you, Vasilios. And I'm just looking at what you are currently on. Okay. Let's go next to Diana. Hey there, Diana. So you would say, your question was, would you give any advice differently to someone with fibromyalgia? So fibromyalgia is autoimmunity to the muscles, right? So there's something that's in the muscles that's causing the immune system to attack the muscles, and that's inflammation, and inflammation leads to pain and dysfunction. Okay, now what are those things that are triggering the autoimmunity? It's the heavy metals, the chemicals, the molds, it's all these toxicities, what I call the usual suspects that we've been talking about. Okay, now I just want to clarify something, is that autoimmunity can either be that there's a toxicity that's inside that cell that the immune system is trying to go after, and it just has to destroy the outside of the cell in order to be able to do so. So let's say rheumatoid arthritis. Let's say, or let's do fibromyalgia. Let's say Bartonella, which is a major cause of fibromyalgia, or mold. It's inside the muscles. Here comes the immune system. It sees it and it wants to get rid of it, but it can't. This is the immune system. It's a little mouth. And it wants to get rid of it, but it can't. It has to go through the muscle cells, unfortunately, to do that. And guess what happens? It destroys the muscle cells. It messes with the nerves that are in the muscles. Consequently, you get pain, right? So what you have to do, and so that's one theory. The other theory is that the autoimmunity is in the immune system sees the infection, like let's say Bartonella, and Bartonella looks like muscle cells, and consequently then it attacks the muscle cells. This is called molecular mimicry. I believe that more likely the first thing is happening, where the infection is getting inside the cell and then the immune system is attacking it. So basically what you have to do is you have to remove that infection from the body, or decrease the amount that's present, and then the immune system is like, okay, great, it's gone. Because what the immune system is supposed to do when it mounts that inflammatory reaction is it needs to get rid of that problem. It wants to wall it off, and it wants to get rid of it. If it does it, then it just goes back down and it gets quiet. But everybody who's got fibromyalgia, autoimmunity, fatigue, the immune system and the inflammation is stuck in the on position. Okay, and so consequently you get a lot of pain and dysfunction, and then you get these deficiencies that end up leading to a number of these different symptoms. So hopefully that's helpful for you. Quick little story. And oftentimes Bartonella can also cause thyroid disease, or Hashimoto's thyroiditis. And so the infection will get inside the thyroid, and then the immune system is attacking the thyroid and breaking off pieces of the thyroid. And we see time and time again, if somebody is on thyroid medication, we address the Bartonella, the inflammation goes down, the thyroid kicks back on, and then all of a sudden people don't need as much, if at all, their thyroid medication. We're able to wean off of their thyroid medication, which is always so much fun. There is a question in the group that I just wanted to answer quickly. Mohammed said, I took 10,000 IUs of vitamin D daily for a month and got sandpaper skin and super dehydrated. Interesting. So it would be interesting to see what dose you can tolerate well. It could be the form of vitamin D, so make sure it's vitamin D3. There are some vegan forms as well. So oftentimes vitamin D3 does come from lanolin of sheep, which is the fur, some component of the fur of the skin. And so you may want to look at a vegan form of vitamin D. Okay, but I definitely recommend that you find a way how to take some. Maybe you also need maybe some topical vitamin D would be better for you as well. And there are some options out there. Okay, Diana, hopefully that was helpful for you. Thanks for your question. And Todd, your question was, appreciated a comment that you previously made about becoming extremely exhausted after unearthing and removing the root emotional issues and blocks. Good, thank you. I'm glad it was helpful. I went through that and it would have been a lot more scary if you had not made this important comment. Good. Anything more you can say to help me integrate this experience would be most welcome. So I would say you gotta put your hands over your heart and just send yourself a whole bunch of love. And right now we can send you a whole bunch of love. And Todd, because it's challenging, and anybody who's suffering, you know, may you find peace. And this is one of the reasons why we have nervous system retraining in our program, because it's so important to go through this transition. And we all have some sort of emotional trauma. It may not be something huge, like some sort of significant abuse, but it could be something like I had that some people may consider less significant, but was really significant for me, which was rejection by a peer group. And it happened twice in my life. And it changed the way that I looked at the world. And I saw and it increased inflammation in my body, increased stress in my body because I didn't feel safe. Right? So you just have to love yourself, be really gentle with yourself. And part of this also is because it is stressful on your body going through that process, is that sometimes the step 2 products can really be helpful, the big 3. So adrenals, mitochondria, and thyroid support can really be helpful in dealing with that stress. But oftentimes it's like riding waves on an ocean. You just kind of have to go with it and just know that you're going to come out clean on the other side. And keep practicing. You know, we talk about our daily mindset practice. Keep practicing gratitudes, envisioning your ideal day, looking at any sort of limiting beliefs that you have and flipping them into empowering beliefs. And then any sort of negative questions that you're asking yourself, like, why me? Why is this happening to me? And flipping it into more of an empowering belief, like, what can I do today to love myself even more? What can I do today to improve my health even more? Is really the way to go. Avoiding Facebook, avoiding the news, avoiding social media, only putting, being a real guardian, a real safeguard, a real keeper of the thoughts that go into your brain, and just getting very conscious around any negative thinking and slowly moving it out of your existence. All right, wonderful. Yes, Anisha, it is the same protocol for post-jab issues as well. And Todd, hopefully that was helpful for you. Thanks so much for the feedback. I always love hearing that my advice was helpful. So thank you. All right, Nancy. Nancy says she went to the ENT specialist and the diagnosis was inflammation and sinusitis. Treatment was belladonna, Homacort, and etespang, policrestrum at Temperance. Sounds like some homeopathics, which is super cool that an ENT doc is doing that. But you're in Barcelona, so maybe that's where we need to go for our healthcare. And they recommended it for 3 weeks. He could see with the camera that the thick saliva, that, believe me when I say that I've been having this symptom since 2009 after being exposed to dust and leaks for so long, was coming not from the lungs, but from the nose. Then all the symptoms in my head and ear, constant noise and tumble dryer and nose, could they be related to mold? Absolutely. You were diagnosed of CFS in 2011 and Lyme and co-infections in 2017. Thank you, Nancy. So yes, absolutely. A major cause of chronic sinus conditions and chronic sinus congestion is mold and yeast. The Mayo Clinic did a landmark study. Gosh, it's been about 20 years now, but they found that I believe that it was 30 to 40%, but I've seen numbers that are even higher than that, of chronic sinus conditions are fungal related. So yeast or mold. And so it's very common. So you want to make sure that you're getting the mold out of the body. You want to make sure that oftentimes we're recommending that you're using a Neomed or some sort of sinus rinse, neti pot, where you're putting some sea salt and water, and then also putting in some antifungals that we'll use. And there's a number of different kinds that I'll recommend, but you have to start low, go slow, ramp up, depending on whether or not somebody has mold or has yeast. Now, with molds, you do have to also remember that you want to bind them up and pull them out before you start going after them, because if you start to kill them with like an antifungal, oftentimes it just makes mold mad. So you can't treat it the same as yeast. You do have to be a bit careful about that. But binding up with a binder and some glutathione can be really supportive. And we talked about binders today. I talked a little bit about that biotoxin binder. The other binder that I really like is called Detox 2, which you do have to take about 60 minutes away from food and supplements, but it's pretty amazing. It's also got some aloe in it and a number of other components that really help with leaky gut. And then in terms of the glutathione, the products that I like are is by Research Nutritional. It's called Trifortify. It comes in glycerin, so it's a bit sweet in a watermelon flavor or an orange flavor, and I would suggest taking a little bit, an eighth or a quarter of a teaspoon to start a few times a week, just to make sure that you can tolerate it. There is another product that is in the store called Readisorb, Readisorb, that is really good, but it tastes like sulfur, which is the natural flavor of glutathione. And then you also have to keep it in the fridge. And I find that most people, if there's anything in the fridge like this or like fish oils, they just forget about taking them. So I would much rather, and myself included. So those are my recommendations that can be really helpful for getting mold out of the body. But once again, it's never just mold. It's in context with these other 33 potential causes. But that's one of the things. Those are some of the things that you can potentially use to support yourself. All right, Nancy. Hopefully that's helpful for you. And then Deborah, with the amazing Italian last name. I think it's Italian. So in general, you say, is there a time of day that people experience a slump in energy, either due to getting up early, getting their to-do list done, chilling after a workout, not enough food nourishment, or a caffeine crash? Yeah, usually 11 o'clock and then between 2 and 4 p.m. So like 3 o'clock. 3 o'clock is really the big one. And those are usually adrenal or thyroid crashes. Oftentimes the big three that I've been talking about, adrenals, thyroid, and mitochondria, they all travel together. And they all kind of contribute to the energy and some of these crashes throughout the day. So you've mentioned a number of things here, in terms of getting up early. Maybe you're not getting 7 to 9 hours of sleep a night like you really need to. Getting your to-do list done. So maybe you're if that's a mental to-do list or things that you're going through, maybe that's why you're kind of draining your adrenals and your mitochondria and your thyroid, and so then you're crashing. So you can be using up this energy as well. Chilling after a workout. So once again, the conversation that or the answer that I just made for exercise. So if you are exercising and you and your hormones and your big three are not well supported and you've got a number of these toxicities, guess what? The exercise that you do is actually going to be too stressful on the body and you're going to feel worse. We never want you to feel worse after anything. We want you to experience, and when we kill infections and whatnot, we want you to experience this much die-off or this much feeling worse. But generally, if you feel worse, it's stressing out the body, and that's not what we're looking for. So we want you to continue making progress throughout this throughout our program. And so you want to, oftentimes there's these little dips or these little bumps along the path where you just kind of have to get back on. But when those happen, we want them to be small corrections. It's not like you've been hit with a hammer that then you have to get back on the horse and you're 2 months now going backwards, right? So our goal is always to support you continuing to move forward. A couple of questions here. So as part of your Fix Your Fatigue program from Anisha in the group, do you also have included any food-related coaching or help, like meal plans, recipes, shopping lists, and cooking classes when change or update in diet is needed? Thank you so much. Yes, we definitely do that in our one-on-one. In our one-on-ones, you get monthly coaching with our nutrition coach, who's also our mold remediation coach, as you go through the program. And so she helps out with all those different things. And then she also mans the group if you have any sort of questions that come up. So food's definitely an important part of this. But you'll hear me not talk a ton about food because people have been through so many different diets when they come to see us and so many different food plans. And frankly, they're kind of burnt out around food. And so we try to keep it simple: meat and vegetables, and let's work on this other stuff. And then you can kind of make more tweaks to the food. But we try not to spend too much time on the food and just give you the necessities that you need, because the other things are so important as well. Because people can just spend a ton of time on food as well as a ton of time healing the gut. Gut is very important. But guess what? If you've spent more than 6 months trying to heal your gut and you haven't had success, it's because you've got a toxicity that's not letting you heal the gut. So you have to go after the heavy metals, chemicals, molds, and infections. And then Mohammed said it's D3 from Thorn. So I think that's lanolin. So definitely check out a vegan form. But Thorn is a good company, and the D3 is the right form. So that's something. Oh, and the other thing to consider too is that oftentimes, vitamin D will make the immune system work better. So if you've got an infection, if you've got something that the immune system has to go after, and let's say the immune system is kind of quiescent, it's quiet, it's not doing too much, and then you stick some vitamin D on there, all of a sudden the immune system is like, hey, what's going on here? Hey, who's that over there? And then they run over there and they start attacking. So it's very possible that the symptoms that you were experiencing were die-off, where it's killing off something, and then you're getting dry skin and whatnot because you're not consuming enough water to help those toxins get out of the body. That's just one theory, but I'm not entirely sure. And then Kate had a question. I have little money. Where would I start? I fixed my dental and addressing mental health. I have Epstein-Barr, I know, and adrenal exhaustion. Yeah. So once again, going through the 4-step process and figuring out, the big 3 are going to be what you're going to want to replace. And then you're going to want to go after those causes that you're sure that you have. But I think, taking a binder, taking some glutathione, and then taking a product that I love for die-off support, is called Detox One, with a main component of that being sarsaparilla or smilax, and then taking something for the Epstein-Barr virus. That's going to be a great way, and that's maybe taking 5 supplements or something like that. But that'll get you a significant way to your goal. One of the things you have to remember is that with every cause that you have, that you remove, you're basically removing a layer of toxicity off of your body that then frees up the immune system to come back and help you get rid of these infections, because you actually can't get rid of these infections just by using antimicrobials. And everything we use, because we're in the online space and I operate as a health coach, everything we use is natural. And really potent natural stuff. But even with that, and even with antibiotics, you're not going to be able to get rid of these infections without having a somewhat intact immune system, which means you've also got to deal with heavy metals, chemicals, and molds. Okay. So hopefully that was helpful for you, Kate. Start low, go slow, address the major components that you have, those big 3, and then molds is just a huge cause for so many people. Taking a binder can also be helpful for the heavy metals, chemicals, opening up the detoxification pathways, and then also going after the Epstein-Barr if you believe that that's a major cause for you. But in reality, you've got to find your 20 plus causes, and then you got to figure out which are the most important ones for you when finances are limited. All right, back to you, Deborah. Hopefully that was helpful for you. Next up is Aaron. Aaron said, have you had success specifically with the COVID-19 vaccine injuries? I do not believe this has the same root cause as other injuries, and my current functional medicine doctor does not seem to realize this, as I'm not making progress. Yeah, so you have to address the spike protein. Essentially, you're introducing the spike protein into the body, and that's how you're trying to mimic what the virus is doing. And so consequently, then you want to make sure that you're addressing it from several different aspects. So like we talked about with the pandemic, Google Doc, hopefully that's helpful for you. Ivermectin has also been helpful in speaking with a number of different practitioners, but it's very likely that your functional medicine doc is just not that knowledgeable in infections, because that's kind of a big part of this process, and they need to have some knowledge around that. But it's also not clear cut. You know, like I said, this is very new. We don't have a ton of knowledge around this. This is, you know, what I have found out from myself, as well as from other functional medicine practitioners anecdotally. Okay. So a couple more questions. We'll go a little bit past 5 since it's just 3 minutes too. So Banny had asked, I have dysautonomia since having the virus 2 years ago, along with other symptoms suggestive of autonomic nervous system dysfunction, like very dry eyes and sometimes dysregulated breathing, but no fatigue. Is your program likely to help me? So the answer is yes, from some of the previous questions that we've answered. It seems like you just have not been affected by the virus in the places that produce energy. So it sounds like your adrenals and mitochondria are still pretty functional, but the fact is that you still have live active virus. And so this is the biggest message for anybody who's got long CVID. I forgot we were going to post this on YouTube, and so I had been using the C word, but generally I don't. By having long haulers, it's just really important for you to realize that there is live active virus present. There have been several studies to take a look at this and have found that even months, even for people after they get rid of their infection and they feel like they don't have any symptoms, they still have live active virus on intestinal biopsy, in the bloodstream, in tissues. And so we know, and especially after you start treating virus, and then all of a sudden people's symptoms get better, then you know that you're on the right track. And so that's like the biggest thing that you have to deal with when it comes to long haulers. You need to make sure you're addressing the live active virus, make sure that you're thinning the blood because of all the clotting that's happening, that's allowing the virus to get around the body. Optimizing and balancing the nervous system and autoimmunity, in addition to removing all of these toxicities that we talked about in step 4, the heavy metals, chemicals, the usual suspects that we're all mentioning, because this is the major reason why people get long haulers versus why people don't, is because they have other causes. You know, we're seeing some studies where 73% of people who have long haulers also have reactivated Epstein-Barr virus, but which came first? They probably had Epstein-Barr virus reactivated first. It wasn't a big deal for them. And then all of a sudden, now they get the pandemic virus that ends up triggering that reactivation, or that the fact that now you can actually see it because now they're studying it and they're saying, oh, well, what else is present, right? It's all these toxicities that are contributing to long haulers. So hopefully that's helpful for you. And we do have a long haulers program component of our program, and you probably saw as part of one of our toxicities, we do have the pandemic virus. So hopefully that's helpful for Benny. And then, let me just check if there was anything else on that. Yeah. Maureen has a question. Does mold cause oxalate poisoning in your body, or does oxalate poisoning from high oxalate foods promote mold growth in your body, causing loss of beneficial bacteria, which allows mold to take over? Gosh, what a great question. So you probably had an OAT test, an organic acid test, and you were like, why is my oxalate level so high? So mold and yeast do feed oxalates in the body, because I do see that when you get rid of yeast and you get rid of mold, that the oxalates come down. It's, I know that it can be helpful. I don't work with autistic kids anymore, but that's usually the only time that I recommend a low oxalate diet, because oxalate, I mean, sometimes it can be helpful for other folks, but oxalates are pretty much green leafy vegetables, and they're so good for you for the most part. So I really hesitate to pull those out of the diet, and I have found success going this other direction. So by getting rid of the fungi. Hopefully that's helpful for you, Maureen. And then Leah's question here. I have fatigue and dizziness following a fall with impact to the head and blacking out for a few seconds. What to do? CAT scans of the head and neck were good, but I do have numbness on the right side of the face, trigeminal nerve issue as one result, which I hope will go away. I hope it will go away too. So a couple questions that I kind of need to know. If you are watching, drop them into the comment section. How long ago did you hit your head? Because if you hit your head a long time ago and you're still having the fatigue and dizziness, that might be a little bit, my recommendations may be a little bit different. But you also said you've had 4 years of dizziness, some of which resolved with glasses that adjusted peripheral and central vision. Dizziness and fatigue have fully returned. So it seems like maybe 4 years ago, I'm going to assume you had the injury and then you had dizziness and fatigue. And so some of the things that you need to consider is, if you haven't done an Epley maneuver, I would definitely recommend that you do that. It's kind of where you hang your head off the table. Oftentimes your family doc can do this, or maybe neurologist or chiropractor or physical therapist can do this EPLEY maneuver. But I've seen people, I had one gal from Spain who was visiting, and she had dizziness for probably about 20 years, and nobody ever did this maneuver on her. And I did it right there on the table, and her dizziness was gone. And so that can be BPV, benign positional vertigo. And so that might be part of what's happening. But they're also, just by jiggling your brain or knocking on your head, you can actually cause a little bit of brain damage. So, if you had a really significant fall, you may have some swelling on the brain. It sounds like the CAT scans are all normal, but you may want to do some things loving for your brain, like DMSO. DMSO. You're going to smell like creamed corn if you get the IVs. There is somebody in Olympia, Washington, I know, who does it, Tom Griffith. At least he did back several years ago. You can also get it orally. It's a very high sulfur molecule, and there are some studies on decreasing brain inflammation. It has been shown to be helpful in people who have brain injuries. So that's definitely something to consider. And then things that will increase fats, because the brain is 60% fat, if not more. So high dose fish oils, phospholipids like phosphatidylcholine, phosphatidylserine can be really helpful. Anti-inflammatories in general. Red light on the brain would be really anti-inflammatory. Those are the things I'm thinking right now. Hopefully that's helpful for you. Okay. And then last but not least, we've got Trisha. So Trisha says, I have long haulers with fatigue, POTS, and depression. Your views on ashwagandha, please, helpful for adrenals or make the fatigue worse. So ashwagandha can be really supportive for adrenals and thyroid. And sometimes they do make people worse, but sometimes it's because they're too stimulating. They sometimes have a component in them, the solanine, which is a nightshade, which sometimes people think that they're reacting to, but usually the dosing is so low, or the amount that's in there is so low, that it's not really having to do with nightshade. But if you are reactive to eggplant and peppers and potatoes and tomatoes, then it could be that ashwagandha might be an issue for you. And if you do feel worse, you just want to try a different supplement. Sometimes ashwagandha I see is more of supporting the thyroid. So sometimes if you support the thyroid and the adrenals need to be supported, you will feel worse. So you just have to pay attention to that, and vice versa. Though usually if you support the adrenals, it's going to in turn support the thyroid. But usually if you support the thyroid and the adrenals need support, that's when you're going to feel worse. So hopefully that makes sense. All right. Thank you guys so much for your questions today. I'm just going to look in the chat box and see if there is anything else. Awesome. So if you guys are interested in joining our course at 50% off right now, please go ahead and jump into the program, and the code is half off. I forgot to mention that. So Nick, if you want to drop the code to the program again into the chat. There it is. I see it. I see it there, and then you want to put the code, which is half off, all one word. So I'm going to go ahead. There it is. Okay, great. So Nick put the half off code, and then I put the link there. So thanks so much for joining us here today. Have an amazing day, and I look forward to seeing you guys on our next call. Be well.